Okay, hello to everybody. It's my great pleasure to present you Father Oleh Kindiy, an assistant professor at the Ukrainian Catholic University here in Lviv. As alumni of the university, Oleh also studied in Washington in USA, where he made his PhD at the Catholic University in Washington. So it's a great honor. Afterwards, Oleh Kindiy finished also Lviv Spiritual Seminary in Holy Spirit in our city, and for many years he teach different courses at the university, as well as on our distance learning master's program in ecumenical studies. The main interest of Father Oleh is, of course, patristic. He likes to read fathers, to quote them, to study fathers, to have fresh view on their theology, on their style of life, which is it is always an inspiration for the church life as well. And Father Oleh is also interested in ecumenical studies, and there's a lot of different friends not only in Ukraine but around the world. And I'm very happy that Father Oleh raised such important question on ecology, and it is a question which was raised also by the Pope Francis in his encyclica, and it would be very interesting to see what fathers on the fathers thought to more than 1 millennium before, in the beginning, when the church started to grow. So, Father Oleh, please
Okay.
share your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Father Roman. Actually, as Father Roman has mentioned, my background training is in church fathers and patristics, and I came to the what we would call the social teaching questions like ecology, or poverty and wealth and poverty, or war and peace, and some other social issues. This is something that I've been interested in the last 4 or 5 years. I've written something on that subject, and I actually think that even though the course that right now I'm teaching at the distance learning program is dedicated to the survey of the Orthodox tradition, which covers understanding of the tradition itself, understanding of the main theological questions regarding filioque, some Christological debates, and how those issues are now re-emerging in ecumenical dialogue, ecumenical discussions. I actually found that we touched the question of eco-theology. That is also one important point of contact between different churches, both Orthodox and Catholic and Protestant, even though there is an uneasy history, uneasy background for this eco-theological studies. Let me just outline what I would like to talk about right now, and then I'll proceed. So in my first 20, I'll shorten it. In my first 20-25 minutes, I'd like to talk about the prehistory of eco-theology of the 20th century. I'd like to mention a person whose name is Lynn White. That's an American historian who actually said that all the modern eco-theological problems, or modern ecological problems, derive from the Christian worldview, Judeo-Christian worldview, where person or humanity or man is at the center of creation. And so that's what Lynn White would begin to argue, that's the problem why we have ecological crisis today. But I'll mention briefly about that problem. And then There's a whole political background, as I have discovered, traveling around Europe and also the United States, that very often if somebody begins to talk about eco-theology, everybody then immediately thinks that this is going to be some kind of a liberal, theological, weak, non-serious discourse. And so, and I'd like to challenge that that approach. And then, just very briefly, several references to church fathers on the one hand, and modern Orthodox theologians and thinkers that are actually developing the ancient patristic thought. Okay, so prehistory of eco-theology in the 20th century. Of course, well, I come from Ukraine. This is the country where Chernobyl took place. This is one of the major ecological crises of our planet. And it's needless to say that we observe in many of the less developed countries, in the what we call third world countries, that the pollution of the air, the pollution of the water, and the quality of life, quality of food is actually being deprived, and actually it's a threat to human life. There are some studies that are saying that our planet Earth, that has a population more or less of 7 billion people, our planet Earth is producing enough food for everyone, but from 30 to 50% of all the food that is produced on this planet, we as human society, we actually throw it away to the garbage. So there's a problem of how we consume what the Earth is providing us with. There's a enormous problem with cancer or other sicknesses or illnesses that are actually the result of the ecological pollution. I mentioned the third world countries, but it's also an issue for the better developed countries, Western Europe and the United States. Big cities are all polluted, and this is part of it. Reality that we are living in, and more and more scientists and environmentalists are recognizing that this is a danger behind it. Some preachers actually are willing even to present it as an apocalyptic problem challenge, but I'll talk briefly about eschatology in a little while. So let me now turn to a person with the name Lynn White, who in 1960 published a very short and influential article claiming that ecological problems are the result of the Judeo-Christian worldview, because it's the Judeo-Christian religion that, on the one hand, desacralizes Earth. There is this understanding that a person, people should not worship mountains or water or trees, right? So the material world is not to be worshipped, and so there is this desacralization of the world on the one hand, but at the same time there's this creation story which says that the earth is for us to use, the earth is for us to consume and to be happy by taking the goods of the earth. So there is a shift in mentality, and Lynn White actually claims that even though Christianity was being able to spread out quickly in the first millennium, it's only in the 14th, 15th, 16th century that at least the most populated portion of the world, meaning Europe, Northern Africa, and all the way to Middle East, that's where Judeo-Christian worldview, so to say, flourishes. So that's where the abuse of nature began on the higher scale. And the 20th century is only the time when everything is happening so much faster, and therefore this is so much more visible. There is a third dimension of this problem, and I myself, when I was a student and when I taught in the United States, I could see that quite often in many places, that whenever you would say that you are a Christian and you, well, you think that the planet needs to be protected, immediately, at least in American context, there's this danger of saying or accepting this kind of discourse connected to some other issues like gay marriage or liberal religious thought. So there's some kind of connection between environmentalism and liberal theology. And I think this is something that needs to be demythologized. This needs to be reconsidered because family life and church teaching on family, that's one thing. And church teaching on environment and on nature should be a different thing. And they should not mingle, even though there are a lot of connections. So in the context of the Orthodox Church of the 20th century, this has been recognized quite early, from the middle of the 20th century. But this is very well seen in the works of the so-called Green Patriarch Bartholomew. There are a lot of good works, a lot of good studies that he actually inspired among Orthodox theologians. I can only mention a couple of them: John Chrysologus, Samuel Rose, Elizabeth Kritov, and I can go on and on. There are a lot of good studies on ecotheology. John Zazoulos and other important figures, important Orthodox theologians, are actually now exploring this question and emphasizing that Church has always was keen on protecting the nature, and everything begins with this important phrase that we read in the Gospel of John, where it says that God loved the world so much that he gave his only begotten Son as a sacrifice for it. So the emphasis is that God loved not only humanity, not only human beings, us people, but also he loved his whole creation. And so his sacrifice on the cross is not only a sacrifice for the people, but for the whole created world. And this is the foundation for our eco-theological reflection. So, as I mentioned, a political attitude that if you are a Christian and you are pro-environment, that means that you must be also pro-gay, pro-democrat. I don't know, the American context has its own particularity, and I think we should recognize that these things should not be mingled. Eco-theology has its own field, its own roots, and its own arguments. Let me come back very briefly to the church fathers, because if you look at any of the modern Orthodox theologians, that's who they are turning to, and I think this is a good source to look into. Of course, the Scripture, of course, the Old Testament, New Testament passages where creation and the world are very intertwined. Adam is created out of earth, out of clay, and after the sin, Adam goes back to the earth, of course. And there is, on the one hand, understanding that man is the steward of the nature and is entitled to consume the goods of the nature on the one hand, but also at the same time that concept of stewardship is very important, because it's not just using and abusing nature, but also protecting it, making sure that nature is treated in a sustainable way. And this is very nicely reflected in the concept of the sabbatical year, or seventh day, Sabbath, where people relaxed, people were asked not to work, and every seventh year the earth was given also time to re-flourish, renew itself. So there are many good notions in the scripture that we have, and when we look at the church fathers, they're drawing those ideas and actually developing them. And it's very important, for instance, for Gregor of Nyssa to emphasize that, and together with him later, Maxim, the confessor, will do that, and many other important church fathers. They're saying that a human being is a microcosm, and it's connected to the macrocosm or the macrocosm or the whole universe. So there is a intimate connection between the smallest and the largest. The big controversy of the 2nd century, of course, first, 2nd century, is the so-called Gnostic controversy, where Gnosticism, as you know, Gnosticism said that the whole created world is evil in itself, and so it needs to be thrown out, it needs to be freed from. And the church fathers with Tertullian and Clement of Alexandria, of course, Origen and Athanasius, they're the great, they would all defend that the earth is good, and it's also built on a very important notion of the creation story, where God has created this world and said, this is good, this is good, this is not a mistake, as the Gnostics would say. The origin of this world, according to Gnostics, is part of the chaos, it's part of the mistake. But for the Christians, from the very beginning, creation is good. It's made by God, and it's decent. It has nothing evil inside of it, intrinsically, ontologically. It's only through the sin of the man that the sin is widespread, and it actually creeps into the nature, and then we can see the results of it all over the world. And we see this Paul in his letter to the Romans. He says that the whole earth is groaning, waiting, expecting, almost crying for the revelation of the sons of God. So that the whole universe, the whole nature is waiting for us people to wake up and to begin to live in a just way, so that the coming of Christ, the coming of justice, coming of the new era, coming of the new world, new heaven, new earth, will come together. And so this is all rooted in the ancient text of the Church Fathers. Of course, the Church Fathers were extremely aware of the problem of the asceticism, and this is very explicit in the monastic tradition. When you read Evagrius of Pontus or Macarius or many other ascetics, you will recognize, or the lives of the saints in the desert fathers, you would see how carefully they used food, and how important it was to develop, as Basil the Great in his rules would emphasize, that consumption in itself is not evil. It's good. It's part of the constitution. It's part of the nature. It's part of us. But if you live in harmony with God, and when you live in harmony with each other, then we also live in harmony with the world. And so, what is asceticism? What is the fasting, for instance? A very important part of the Orthodox tradition, fasting. Actually, not eating meat, not eating cheese or milk or the dairy products. Why is it so important? Because there's this understanding that consumption needs not to be shortened or cut off from us, but consumption of the food needs to be done in a way that fills in our needs. Everything else beyond fulfilling our needs is abuse. So, well, this is the big question: is how much do I need to be healthy? How much do I need to be fed, to be nourished? Of course, for Basil, this goes not only to the food, but also to the clothing, to the lifestyle, to the silver, to the houses we have around us, just everything according to your need, nothing too much. Too much is already introduction of the injustice, because then if somebody has too much, somebody else will have too little, and then that's where the injustice will begin. Faisal even in his homily on fasting, he says that if everybody, if all the people, all the Christians would fast, i.e., meaning consume according to the needs, then there would be no wars, there would be no injustice, there would be harmony between people. But just because people abuse, they eat too much, they want too many clothing, they want too many things. That's where the problem begins. I understand that in the 20th century, 21st century, this is a challenge that economists will come and say, so are you teaching me that we should not consume, or we should cut off or cut our consumption? That's going to kill our economy. I think this is something that we need to negotiate, and we can discuss that later. But I think what we've seen in the economy is that the economy always adapts to the needs of the people, and we've seen this with industrialization or post-industrialization of the 19th, 20th century, 21st century, where new markets have emerged, that new services, new goods have been produced that actually do not involve consumption of the resources of the earth. Okay. A third very important patristic notion for the eco-theology is, of course, deification. And deification we normally apply it again to human person. Deification is the result of the communication of the person of God and the person, human person, and then through that hypostatic connection, then there is a result of what Peter in his second letter says, that we are participants, we are actually fighting in, we are actually participating in the divine nature, and that connection of two natures, just like in the Council of Chalcedon, in this wonderful, beautiful Christological explanation of how two natures, divine and human, have become together without merging and without separation in one person of Christ. That applies also on the level of on an anthropological level, because it applies that our whole physique, our whole physical world, is also engaged in communicating with God. So we don't just communicate with God intellectually or spiritually or emotionally, but it's also a change of our lifestyle. Actually, it's a reflection of our body, our gestures, our consumption comes in. So that's an important eco-theological dimension of the deification tradition. And of course, the fourth that I would like to mention today is eschatology, because of course I've heard this wonderful preaching of one, I'm not going to mention the name, a preacher from California would say, well, if this world is doomed to be burned down, I'm just going to buy a big car, I'm going to fill in full tank of gas, and I'm going to just use as much as I want, as much as I can afford, because it's going to go down to sewage anyways. And I think that's part of the apocalyptic worldview that some church traditions have developed, that the whole world is doomed to collapse in this tragedy, in this fire, and these punishments, and this very negative end of the world is ahead of us. And a lot of the Christian theologians are using that fear to appeal to the people, and you hear that here and there that's being used on the one side. On the other side, the Roman Catholic, for instance, approach to this eschatological eschatology is that the world world is doomed according to the apocalypses, or the stories that Jesus says before he's crucified. Um, so he says that, well, the end of the world is at hand, so we need to be ready, and the world will be collapsing, in fact. So there's truth to it, but with death comes also resurrection, and this is a very important notion, that we look at the end of the world not only through the prism of a tragedy, of a trauma, but also with hope of transition, kind of change. This is well, I'm switching to the Roman Catholic, but I'm going to go to the Orthodox understanding of eschatology in just a minute. For the Roman Catholic perspective, it is important to emphasize that there is a growth of the kingdom of heaven. This is beautifully explained in Gallican and Spes, the Second Vatican Council. That there is a growth of the kingdom of heaven, and at the same time there is human progress. And the fathers said that we should not mingle, we should not substitute growth of the kingdom of heaven and human progress as the one thing. These are not one thing. These are two separate things, but they do overlap. So we see a lot of positive developments in our world, and that's part of our hopes for the better world. In Orthodox tradition, one Lutheran famous theologian, Jürgen Moltmann, that's what he interprets the Orthodox tradition. Orthodox eschatology, which is important here in our ecotheological context. He says that in Orthodox theology, eschatological perspective is extremely positive, because we see the end of the world as glorification, as transfiguration. Of course, there is death of the world, but that death is overcome by the resurrection. So the emphasis is mainly on the resurrection. On the resurrection of the body, of course, the resurrection of the whole world. And so we bear our personal responsibility for this world, because this is the world that will be also born again, of course purified, of course, it will be a new world, but the same with wounds, as Jesus appeared to Thomas, showing that that's his own body that was crucified, but it has new quality. And so this is going to be the same world that will die and will come back eventually. And so we bear this responsibility for this world. And there's criticism that perhaps this is too optimistic of a vision for this world, but at the same time, it's now I'm slowly coming to the modern Orthodox topics. I'm not going to cover all of them, but at least some of the most important ones. And one of the most important topics is this liturgical, ceremonial understanding of life, in which, in the liturgical setting, the kingdom of heaven has already arrived. So by singing the Christ Holy Hymn, by sharing the Eucharist, we are already in that resurrected world. And so when we look at the icons, we already look into the future for us, liturgical, for the Orthodox theological mindset. What we are doing here is we are helping the kingdom to grow, which eventually will be fulfilled in completion. And so let me just add a few more things that people like John Zizulis, or John Chrysalkis, that's his famous work, Beyond the Shattered Images. You actually have the students of the spring semester have the possibility to read a couple of articles by Tamara Gdzalidze, and also Elizabeth Theokritov on the ecotheology. So they emphasize, I'm just going to focus on these four ideas. First, again, the biblical and patristic notion of stewardship. So God has given us this world as pure gift out of love. And so our response to this gift is receiving it with love and also taking care of it. It's not just for us to use and abuse and throw away, but it's also for us to make sure that there is a sustainability, big name for the ecologists, to make sure that our economies are sustainable, that our trees that have been cut off have time to be replanted, and our water that we have consumed have time to be purified and be drinkable again, and on other levels, practical levels, important. Second emphasis that I already mentioned is the liturgical context. So Alexander Schmemann and even John Meindorf, and of course John Zizoulas, they're emphasizing that. John Zizoulas beautifully, referring to Maximus the Confessor, he beautifully says that liturgy is the meeting point of heaven and earth. It's not just a meeting point of God and man. It's a meeting point of the whole world and Creator. And so when the priest actually raises the chalice and discus, and he's singing, yours of your own, we offer you for all and for all. It means that for all men and for all women. There are some translations like that. But it's emphasized that it's not just people, but you're making this offer. It's for the whole created world. And so from this comes this wonderful image that John Zizoulas is developing, that all the people, the whole humanity, is a priest for the created world. So birds and mountains and water and trees are able to praise God through human mouth. It's also very biblical when we look at the Psalm 103. This is the psalm that we're singing in Vespers, or through Matins and Vespers, where the whole created world is mentioned. Praise be to God. In Matins, so let the stars and let the moon and the sun and all the mountains and everything, let everything praise the Lord. So there is this understanding of the liturgical connection between heaven and earth, and people, not just the priest, but the whole humanity is the face, is the representative of the nature, and through people the whole nature is able to pray and to connect, to be in communion with God, because God loved the whole world, the whole cosmos, that He gave His only begotten Son for it. And, well, I already mentioned the eschatological dimension, that for Orthodox theology, it's a matter of how we perceive our vision for the future. Where are we heading to? For the Orthodox Christians, it's the kingdom. It's the big encounter, and it's not just, again, people who are meeting God, but the whole created world, all living in death, all material, everything, the whole nature is the creation of God, and God holds it, takes care of it, and so will recreate it, will resurrect the whole world. Nothing will be forgiven. Only the sins will be perished, and the devil will save us, but the whole world as the good creation will remain. I'm gonna finish here now. Of course, there are many more topics that could be talked about. I'm aware of the shortage of time, you had wonderful. There are wonderful readings at the I think it's block 5 or 6 for the spring semester. Can be can be read. And Tamara Grzebidze has wonderful articles, and there's John Zoulis's materials and John Chrysalkis's works. So if need is, more can be read, but I'm gonna pause here, and if there are some questions, I would be happy just to attempt and answer them. Okay? So there it is. Did you hear me from the very beginning, more or less? Did you understand what I was saying?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
I did.
wonderful.
I did follow what you. Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Is there something that you would like to reflect on?
Yeah. Yes. I would just like to ask. Is there any meeting point between eco theology and the New Age ideology? Sometimes people tend to confuse them. Is there any meeting point, and what could be the major differences between eco theology and New Age ideology?
Wonderful. This is a very good question. Wonderful. Thank you. In environmental wake-up of the 20th century, what we would call the New Age movement uses a lot of the criticism that I just mentioned earlier by Lynn White. It's the Christians, it's the Judeo-Christian worldview that is responsible for the crisis, and so we need to change our mentality and come back to the roots, to the nature, and to worship nature and become one with nature. I think one important, the most important difference between New Age and Eastern Christian understanding of the ecological challenges is that in the New Age, the concept of person, the concept of personhood is dismissed altogether. So there is this understanding that for the future, if we need to change people's mentality, we need to, it's put in the terms that we need to get rid of our egoism, which is the right thing, but we need to get rid of our special status in this world, and we need to just merge with nature, and this is the major difference in Christian perspective. It's the responsibility of humanity is to help this world to grow. Actually, this is an important addition to the concept of stewardship. It's not just taking care of the world, but it's also helping the world to become a better place. So that, again, positive eschatology, that through human activity, including economic activity, political activity, all kinds of other activities, by improving our economies, we are actually improving the world. This is something that John Zoulis is emphasizing, that we are engaged in the growth, in maturation. So the world is becoming more mature through human activity. A wonderful example is the Eucharist. So for Eucharist, people, we use not just grain and water, or just grapes. We take grains and we have to smash it. We have to make bread. So that's a transformation. There is no bread in nature. Bread is part of human engagement with nature. Just like wine. Wine doesn't exist on its own. You need to pick up grapes, and you need to smash them. You have to transform them. This is important. And so we are transforming this world, and we're making this world better. So for New Age ideas is that nature has its own laws, and we shall not interfere with those laws. We just have to let ourselves live according to those laws and not to interfere. The Eastern Christian or Eastern Orthodox position is that we do interfere. Sometimes we interfere too much. That's the abuse. That's the danger. That's the sin. That's the killing. But at the same time, it can be also done in a very noble way. That's like producing bread and wine. And then it's not just producing bread and wine, but it's also offering it back to God. We are offering back to God not grain and grapes, but bread and wine. It's already something that engages human intellect, human hands, human reality, human mentality, human culture. This is what God calls us to be stewards, and stewardship presupposes also what some theologians would say, co-creators. So we are partners with God in helping create this world. Well, this is another level, but this is something that New Age thinkers would immediately oppose to and say, well, this is nonsense. You don't want to go there. You just want to enjoy the sound of the wind and water, and we need to go back to simplicity, so to say. And for the Eastern Orthodox perspective, it's going back not to simplicity, or not going back to nature. It's going back to God. And so, going back to God, of course, presupposes understanding of the sin and God's mercy and cooperation and extremely important intellectual engagement, physical engagement. Not just intellectual, not just physical, it's everything together. Right? Go ahead, maybe you have some other questions.
Yes. Can I ask another question?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
You talked about getting enough for oneself while explaining that's not being drawn too much into consumerism, just taking more than one needs.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering, when can one say that one has gotten enough? As humans, we have this culture of also gathering and preserving, keeping some for another time. So the tendency is for one to keep exploiting nature. So the question is, when can one actually say one has gotten enough? Not so that one does not cause some harm to nature or bring some harm to the ecology, the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hear what you're saying. Well, the main quick answer to your question is making sure economy is sustainable. So by consuming trees, consuming plants, consuming animals, whatever, we are making sure that they're able to replenish. So we've been able to have 3 harvests of rice in China, right? We've invented melioration processes in Israel and planting oranges in the middle of the desert. That's human intellect, and it's nature, it's cooperation. There's no problem with that. The problem begins when human activity goes that far. This is where Bartholomew, the Patriarch of Constantinople, will be in one sound together with John Levin, with Pope Francis. That when we, in his Laudato Si, when we consume that much, that nature is not able to replenish. I think this is the important thing. So consumption itself is not bad. We need to eat, we need to dress, we need to communicate, we need to build houses, we need to take care of the poor, we need to build roads, but we need to build that in the way that we leave this world to our next generations a better place, not a worse place. And so far we've been actually hearing different perspectives. Some would say that we are actually going down the drain. Some say, well, there is a chance for us. For an economist, then, for business people, it's the challenge. If I build a plant, John Zuzoulis has this question, this example. In a Greek village, everybody was poor, but then a business person came in and built a factory that was producing toothbrushes. So everybody was happy because then everybody got the job and had more money, and so more happy. But because of the chemical elements, a lot of the wells and water was polluted, and so that caused a lot of the children to get sick. And so there was a question for the village: do we get rid of the plant? Do we get rid of the business, or we order the business person to make those technologies clean? And so that kind of solved the tension. I think this is the way that I can send you more articles by Elizabeth Kretov. She's written more than a dozen articles actually, dealing with these questions, suggesting to business people that it's not just by producing, but producing in a smart way. So a lot of the new economists are talking about triple P, profit, people, planet approach. This is what United Nations actually has just signed into with the sustainable development goal for the next 15 years, making economies more smart, more clean, more green, not for the sake of some ideology, like New Age, but for the sake of those vulnerable that are around us, and for the sake of our future generations. I think this is. I appreciate that you raised these two important questions. I also am very glad that you were able to connect and hear. I hope that you'll be able to connect sometimes
I
again.
preserve the video and will send to the students to watch.
Father Roman is telling me that there was a recording of this video, of this conversation, so some other students will be able to watch it at their own time, at their own possibility. I appreciate your participating again. And all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Yeah.